I like to think of myself as multicultural, part of the human race, the human family, but I have met different people of different cultures and different backgrounds, and it's beautiful to interact with everybody with different ideas, different faiths. I guess what's most relevant here is my interactions personally with people without faith. What I find is there's the idea that we have to choose. We cannot join the Big Bang, science, and we cannot join creationism, God, and religion. By, the standard of religion, the Genesis, the universe is created so and so, that may be legitimate in of itself, but by the standards of science, it's wanting. By the standard of empirical evidence, the existence of God just isn't rational. But once we understand that there are way many other tools when it comes to investigating reality, empirical evidence is mostly the last one that we use. The rationality of things, the exploring with the mind, that's how it starts. If we only use one tool for all undertakings, it's going to be very, very limited understanding. Everything is a form of knowledge. Even if it may seem counterintuitive, there is rationality. There's just a different perspective. If we can find a way to merge these two ideas, I guess it will make more sense. Well, when I say philosophy, what I really mean is rationality, the art of making sense, basically. When I also say philosophy, the first thing that pops to mind for most people is philosophy is static. I mean, in the newfound things like sciences and arts and music and all types of other things that we use, the first thing that springs to mind, at least for me when I just started, was gray-bearded men draped in robes, marbled halls of ancient Greece and antiquity. But this has more to it. Everything has philosophy or philosophical habits. Everything is a form of knowledge. It's how it's applied that it's more relevant. Philosophy tells us a lot of things about things we can't perceive with our senses. A lot of the knowledges that we have can't be empirically perceived. Philosophy is a tool that doesn't use bottles or labs or vials or test subjects and gathers data on the growths that we have. Philosophy tells of the things and levels of knowledge in those things that we can build on. Philosophy, rationality, more importantly, is a tool that exists in everything and in everyone. It has been polished by revered men like Thales, Pythagoras, Aristotle, Galileo, Newton, Einstein, my mom. It's a daring reality. It's leaping. It's going into a reality where you can't physically experience anything, at least not yet. And nobody can really be void of rationality. Everyone has it. It's an evolutionary achievement, if anything. Whether people have polished it, well, that's a different thing. Because philosophy is partially in everything, and because Plato, as we've been saying, is in everything, there's something that he has called the divided line. I want to find interesting with that is he explains the levels and validity of the different forms of knowledge. Now what Plato does is he creates a line from A to E, and he creates 4 lines in that line. We have the tangible realities and the intelligible realities. The intelligible is the highest forms of knowledge, whilst the tangible are the lowest forms of knowledge. We start with the knowledge acquired through imagination. For example, you may see an apple, and you may see a tree, and you may see the shadow. The sun will shine on the apple and tree, and by looking at the shadow, you can imagine what it is casting that shadow. That imagery that you have in your head will not be perfect because it varies based on the sun, it varies based on the shape of the apple, and that shadow will never truly tell you how that looks. But then you might hear some rustling of leaves in the wind, and you may hear some other things that point out that it's an apple tree. Then it's belief. You believe there's an apple tree there. So with the lowest form, that is imagination, and a tad higher form, that is belief, together this creates opinion. A lot of the things we see around us is those two things. Now, it may not directly be a shadow, but a lot of the things that we perceive, even if it's direct colors, you can't know for sure the validity and true reality of those things, especially if that's what other people are experiencing. If we want to go to the other higher realities, the one above that is hypothesis. Basically, imagine yourself sitting down and under a tree. You look at this tree, you look at the apples on the tree, and you observe the apple fall. You create a hypothesis, like apples always fall at some point or another. It's not only apples that fall, everything else falls too. When I drop my shoe, it falls. When I drop my phone, it falls. When I drop myself, I fall. Then from that, you create a reality based on these lower forms of knowledge to come to a higher form of conclusion. And this higher form of conclusion is when that true knowledge is tested. Plato says that mathematics and geometry, these are true forms of knowledge because they exist within themselves. You don't really have to test the elements of geometry. You never try to test the efficiency of the numbers or the lines. You use them as a lower form of reality to further test higher forms of reality. And then from there, you might want to test the intensity of those things. So if we're looking at the apple again, somebody might ask himself, well, there is something pulling everything down, and surely it's working on the apple as well. Now a very enlightened person might ask, well, if an apple falls, does the moon? And who knows where you're going to get from there. But what does it all mean? Well, Plato tries to basically say that true knowledge cannot be empirically perceived, nor by the senses. Knowledge is the things that we gain through experiences, through the things that we meet in our daily lives. It puts together these lower forms of knowledge for us to devise knowledge of the invisible from the visible. But he says that these lower forms of knowledge, they're not really satisfactory to us because they don't really give us anything higher of purpose. If basically everything that we ever know stops at what we can perceive with our senses, then I guess the cow is the greatest of all philosophers.